Okay, check. We are live. Once again, we're trying to make this a members only video in this episode here. So if you're catching this live stream, good for you. I'm going to show you how to finalize this fork seal replacement rebuilding process. And if you guys were following along, if you're a current member or follower and you caught the part 7, we basically ran into an issue with the dampener rod and the Allen bolt that secures it inside the lower fork leg, or the inner to the outer fork leg essentially. The threads were kind of damaged. And so what I did is I ordered a new tap to try to repair those threads. And the link's basically going to be in the description, and maybe I'll go ahead and even pin a comment to make it kind of easier. Um, it's very common for, especially like an older bike like this Ninja 650R that we're working on here, especially if the forks have been serviced in the past. Sometimes those dampener rod threads, it's really hard to hold the inside of it unless you have like some type of like spanner, or maybe like a plug that could go on the inside of the diameter. But usually you're just trying to use the uh, the spring pressure when the fork's assembled, and you try to loosen up that bolt. Usually with a good spring, there's sufficient pressure to kind of hold, to be able to overcome the force required or torque required to loosen up that bolt. But in this case, I was having an issue, but thankfully they were able to come out. Sometimes it's almost impossible. You have to replace the fork, or spend a lot more time trying to grind off the bolt and then take apart the tube and extract it from the inside. It's possible, just more time consuming. In this case, it was good. It was repairable, and then I was able to use this tap here. This was a M10 by 1.0. It's a H2, and it's a high-speed steel. I'm not sure what the E stands for. Maybe for the trinide coating, or I'm not sure what kind of coating it is. Titanium oxide. No, that'd probably be black. Titanium nitride, maybe. I think that's usually like that gold color. But basically, this is what I use to tamp tap the inside of the dampener rod. And it's, what do you call it? I want to say, I think the H2 has to do with harness. I'm not sure exactly. That may have something to also do with the thread pitch ever so slightly, is what at least what I was asking Chat GPT. And the reason for that is, with a certain size taps like S7, sometimes I think, I forget, or if it's like S2. I'm not sure the way the scale goes, but you'll basically, if you're trying to use it to like chase threads, you'll actually start cutting new threads. So I didn't experience that, and that might also have to do with the type of tap that it is. This one's like a spiral tap, which actually really helped out. It didn't seem to remove a lot of material, which was really good. And I chased the whole, the full length of the threads, and came out pretty good. I was able to achieve the torque, which to achieve that torque, it's 30 newton meters. And sometimes if it's kind of like hard, you'll notice like, oh crap, if you're using a torque wrench trying to hit 30 newton meters, it won't fully torque up. So sometimes what you have to do, and it's just one of those things you're going to run into when you're doing older forks or this style of forks, is you're going to have to use like an impact gun. And what I'll end up doing is, put in like a, one, and then hit it with two, and then I'll finally do like three. And then like when I'm hitting it, and then I'll basically double check it to make sure it's at least, 30 newton meters. um you kind of, it's just the way that it is. I don't know how else to explain it, especially if you're going to be rebuilding it without, having any other type of tool or method to hold that dampener rod. Using an electric or maybe an air pneumatic impact is the only way to remove this bolt. And you're definitely going to want to do it with the fork, the spring, the spacer, and the top cap put back onto it, so there's actually pressure against it while you're either removing or installing, torquing it. But so once again, if you're following this video, uh, in part 7, we did run into that issue. Tap is now in, dampener rod's been corrected. This is one that's been finished here. Oil's been added, fork oil level has been set. That's just as important, and it's been reassembled. Um, Pretty much the last thing to do is, once this fork is installed into the tubes, we're going to go ahead and torque this upper fork cap here, and we'll go ahead and get into the specs, but I got pretty much all the numbers written down here. So if you're watching this, basically pause it, go ahead and get the torque specs and the oil levels required, and I'll kind of go over them more in detail here in a minute. But yeah, this is the first completed fork leg here. And the biggest thing to kind of like look out for, and I was explaining this to the owner of the bike, was basically the fork legs have a decent amount of pitting to them. And there's like really no way to get that out. That's actual chrome that's basically been rusted through. Um, it's basically a steel tube that's been chrome plated. Uh, but if you look in the basically in the travel or the the suspension section on this fork leg in particular, there isn't too much pitting to be concerned about. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. I think it was the other fork leg, the one that we're working on right now, that's currently in the vise. I think that one may have more noticeable pitting. Um, but that's what you kind of want to watch out for. This right here, once you got kind of get to this area, um, it's kind of close. It might max out like right here or something like that. So in time, depending on how the bike's stored, most of this pitting right here is kind of in the triple tree section, which isn't going to make contact with the forks. So it should be okay. But it's pretty much it on that fork. So I've already filled up this fork leg right here. And it's basically two oil specifications. This is for Model A suspension, and I'm assuming that's what I'm working on here. The oil volumes weren't really that much different, maybe within 50 cc's or 50 milliliters. But basically, if you're just doing an oil change without completely disassembling the fork, you'd want to add about 415 milliliters, which is roughly about half a bottle of 1,000 liters. And the best way to measure that, if you don't necessarily have like a vacuum operated tool and you don't have a fork leveling gauge, you can basically use a graduated cylinder like you would in science class. And basically, this is going to be measured in, I believe, cc's, cubic centimeters. And this one's by Motion Pro. It's actually pretty accurate. Um, okay, milliliters. But basically, you'd want to fill it up to what? What did I say? 415. So if you're just doing a basic fork change, you'd like pull off the top of the cap and then just drain everything out. You let the spring and all that stuff, you let it drain out, and then you just kind of go ahead and fill it back up with that 415 milliliters, which is going to be what I want to say about 2, 3 graduated lines above the 400. And then you'd go ahead and just pour that in and rock and roll. If you're doing a full rebuild, basically that little dampener rod in the bottom there that we're messing with earlier, or part 7, that kind of maintains a little bit more oil because there's a ring around the dampener rod, that plastic piston ring that I was referring to, and that will basically hold oil. Unless you take this bolt out right here, the dampener rod bolt, then you'll obviously the oil that's beneath of that will drain out that bolt. But if you're just doing an oil change, the casual or traditional way would be to just pop the top. You pull out your cylinder spacer, flat washer, and the spring, pour the oil out, measure 415 milliliters in your graduated cylinder, pour it in, and then pump it a few times to bleed the air out of the system. That's pretty simple. It's basically pull it up, you let it sit for about 10 minutes, and you should be fine just where it is. When you do a full rebuild, replacing the forks, cleaning the lower tube, checking the bushings, polishing the upper tube, usually it's going to entail a full rebuild. So what it calls for in that case is 489 milliliters, which is basically going to be right below the 500 milliliter graduation line. And in this case, we're just I just usually eyeball it at this point, unless I'm doing just sometimes it's kind of rare unless I'm doing on my own bikes. Usually if I'm doing a fork oil change, this is for me. By the time most people bring me their bikes, they haven't had oil changes and fork seals are leaking. So what I usually do in that case is I just kind of eyeball it. I fill it up to where it needs to be. And then I would use my fork leveling gauge right here, which this is the proper way to do it. This is accounting for everything. But once you've let your oil level settle with the spring, the washer, the cylinder spacer removed, basically the oil level spec is 3.9 inches plus or minus 80 thousandths. So I just pretty much use my measurer here. This is my custom little homemade leveling tool. And basically from here to the tip, that's 4.9 inches plus or minus 80 thousandths. And I'll just hook up my vacuum brake bleeder and we rock and roll. I'll go ahead and set this in here, stick it in, make sure it's like, sits like it's intended to. And then we just basically suck out the oil. Um, Next thing too, I kind of want to get into is just the choice of oil for this bike right here. I've been using Maxima brand products pretty much for the last 10, 15 years, and it's pretty good stuff. Haven't never had any issues. There are two types of oils that they do offer though. They're going to be under a 10 weight, and you're going to see the green bottle here. This is lubricanol, think I'm pronouncing that right. Lubricanol fortified. And that's, I don't know, maybe some type of metal, some type of maybe a silicone or ester, some type of, who knows, could be synthetic or petroleum derived product that they use for, um, you know, basically what makes it, how would I say, like it's an additive that makes it anti-foaming, reduce drag, just basically like the main property that makes this oil. And it's also the main thing is that it's straight 10 weight. So this oil is going to be great for this type of fork here, just due to the fact that it doesn't have a sophisticated dampening system, nor does it have any valving in it. It's all, once again, if you're watching a video part 7, when I was kind of describing how the dampener rod kind of works, it's basically using the oil, or basically the rebound setting of this fork is controlled by the diameter of the fork holes and the fluid viscosity. That's what's controlling the rate at which the oil moves through those holes and fills the chamber of the fork as the fork is retracting, as you would say. So with the 10 straight weight, that's going to be perfect. There's no valving, not super critical. Not saying that you could run the blue bottle, which I'll kind of get into that here in a second. But basically, this is a little bit more expensive. I want to say like $15, $20 a bottle, depending on where you get it from. And this is like a couple dollars cheaper. I think just like around 10 to 12 bucks. It's basically going to be like this is what I'll use for like Harley Davidsons and stuff like that, because they don't have like a sophisticated valving, compression, or rebound system. It's basically the same thing. They'll just have like a spring, a spacer, and that's pretty much it. Now, if we're working like on like a Gixxer R1, R6, we're working on a 636, 600 RR, 1000 RR. Typically, that's going to have compression and rebound settings, or depending on the model, the rebound and compression fittings will be on the top, and sometimes they'll even actually have a spring setting, spring compression setting. Basically, you can basically adjust. I guess you would say depending like the ride, you can kind of manipulate the ride height, but it's mainly set up for fine tuning the suspension based off of the rider's weight or how aggressive they're riding. But yeah, once again, going back into it, this is the oil that we're using and kind of recommended. Now, if you were to use like how I was just mentioning, one of those sports bikes that has actual suspension adjustments, this is better because it's a multi viscosity oil. It's 150 at one temperature, and then it, obviously gets a little thicker at another 165, and it's still a 10 weight. Um, I'm not sure what they call it, SUS viscosity. I'm assuming I have no idea what that stands for, but kind of the same thing. It's saying fade free, zero drag racing formula. So it's probably going to have different additives in it, whatever they use. Um, lubricanol fortified. Not sure exactly what the difference is. The 150, no, 5-weight oil replaces O1 SS7 or standard KYB Ford fluid to use 7, 10-weight or 15-weight fluid to increase dampening. Yeah, so that's the other thing too is people have this conception that, oh, you can basically increase the fork oil viscosity to kind of give you more compression settings, and that's not true. What they'll actually do is give you more rebound adjustment, and what that's doing is it's not how fast the fork basically compresses, but the rate at which it retracts. That's what you would be slowing down using a thicker viscosity oil. Um, let's see here. But yeah, maybe we'll save kind of the dynamics of what makes this, better for that bike versus why I use this for this type of suspension. But without getting into it anymore, we're gonna go ahead and just pop this off a little bit. Oh, it didn't work out the way I wanted it to. All right, it just needs a little bit more. Let's see what that looks like inside. Yeah, I think we're like right there. So let's see what it. Still, I can't see. Kind of get an idea of where I'm. See the fork oil level. Hold the camera still. Tippy toes, but you can see it's about 2-3 inches below the top of the fork tube there, and that's fully compressed. So basically pushed all the way down without any of the internals. And then we're going to set that oil once again 3.9. And it's pretty straightforward. And realistically, that's pretty much it. In theory, fork oil level is now set. So we can go ahead and put this off to the side. Ugh. Cool. Take that outside, stretch it. I like my holes nice and tight. Okay, so let's go ahead and put in our spring. So got to remember this is a progressive rate spring. It's going to have these tighter, closer distance between the coils on the top. It's going to be a little bit more spaced out towards the bottom there. It's only about the upper 20% of the spring length, but you basically want this going down, that facing up. And we'll just go ahead and drop this bad boy in there. All right, cool. So the whole thing here is if you don't set your fork oil level, if you don't put enough on this kind of a fork, what you would feel is probably reduced rebound, um, probably performance. It's probably not going to have enough oil during certain cycling of the fork. If you have too much oil, when you compress the fork or like say hit a huge bump, what will actually happen is it's kind of hard to compress a fluid. It's not like air. So what usually ends up happening is you'll actually blow out the oil seal because basic physics can't really compress a liquid very well. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and put our flat washer in. And it was the way that this wore, the way it wears from touching the top of the spring, and then this surface right here was making contact with the spacer cylinder. So I'll kind of drop this in, kind of using my finger, kind of this down. Okay. Spacer. All right, cool. And this tube had I want to actually point out one thing really quick. Um, this is how you can kind of tell if a tube was improperly serviced in the past or wasn't at some point. But this tube right here kind of had a, would you say, like minor corrosion? And that's going to be from basically like when an oil seal starts to leak, especially on this type of fork on a on a non-inverted fork or a traditional style fork. Once that oil and dust seal goes bad, typically it's going to allow water and condensation to make its way in, and water will start to get in here. And then usually things that kind of wear that have a thin Teflon surface or a raw uncoated surface will typically begin to oxidize or get rust, like what we're seeing here. So that's typically what goes along with changing your fork fluid, and that's just for under normal conditions. If you were to have a a leaking seal, this is what you can expect after maybe a couple months, a year or so. Couple, only it doesn't take very much time, especially if you leave the bike outside in the rain. Maybe a couple weeks. The water, the acids in the water, from all the wonderful industrial pollution, kind of speed the process up. But just time, moisture, that's what ends up happening. So, uh, just the overall condition of these forks, in reality, probably need to be replaced. But to keep this project, realistic for the age and condition of the bike, it's not really worth replacing it. These new inner fork legs here, aftermarket, are just a little over 200 bucks each. And I think the OEM ones were still available, but they were like closer to $400 an inner fork leg. So either way, just to replace the inner fork leg here, still, pretty expensive. Usually I've had pretty good success with, as long as the fork leg's straight, even with like pretty bad pitting, usually it won't leak that bad, which is just my experience. So as long as you Scotch brite them, in my opinion, versus any, most other procedures, should be good. Okay. This thing, let's go ahead and put a little bit of oil here. And okay. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and torque this down using my 22 ml, ml, millimeter. Okay. All right, and here it is. One rebuilt fork. Let's see this real quick. So let's go ahead and wipe this down. All right. Just gonna do a quick little pressure check. So usually I'll just go once after I get them on the bike, take it for a test ride. It's gonna be kind of normal to maybe get a little bit of a film, a little oil film above the dust seal. And typically I'll kind of wipe it off before I take it on the ride. But see there how there's kind of like that micro abrasion to the surface there. Kind of try to get like a 60-degree crosshatch. Same kind of concept as if you're doing piston rings. But yeah, they'll eventually polish out smooth again. Basically having that rubber surface on a steel or chrome surface will eventually smooth out those hash marks. But yeah, we'll usually cycle it like that by hand and then just wipe it down, double check, and then once again, one last time after we get on the bike, go for the test drive. Typically, if a fork is bad, I'll notice it within like a couple miles. It'll start having a slow seep. Usually, if I don't notice it leaking within like the first mile, 2, 3, 4 miles, usually they're good. They should be good. And that's how about 99% of them end up being, maybe 99.9. But yeah, so now that they're all put back together, pretty much the last step is these need to be torqued. And we'll do that basically once they're in the triple trees. And they can either be on this particular model, because of the handlebar setup, might be a little hard for me to get a socket on there with the way that the brake lines and controls are all set up. And I'm just going to go ahead and wipe these out, make sure there's no, so I get all the dust and dirt out of there. And you don't want to have any grease or anything. You want these surfaces to be clean and not too much corrosion. These are aluminum triple trees, if I'm not mistaken. Appear to be aluminum. Okay, so just kind of wiping these out, double checking. Okay, should be good. So let's see, what should we start with? That's gonna be, start with the left-hand fork. So I feel like the left-hand fork was the better of the two compared to the right. But that looks like a 6 millimeter. That's my what? This is a 8. It's a 3, 4. There you go. That looks like a 6. And I kind of want my little sortie. But fuck it. Let's see. So this headlight bracket here, that metal on the tube, that's what's causing a lot of that corrosion there. So just go ahead and kind of slide this up, and you can go ahead and leave it kind of like right there. Now we're going to get into another measurement. Let me get that camera angle. Okay. All right, sweet. So we can see right here kind of how we have the fork tube protruding above the surface of the triple tree. And you can see there's obviously the triple tree, the inner fork tube, and the cap. When we take our measurement here, it's not going to be it's typically not based off the height of the cap. It's based off of the top of the fork tube. So when you do your measurement, you'd almost want to account for the thickness of the fork cap. And let's see here, top of fork to bridge is 400 thousandths. So get our micrometer here. Seems like quite a bit. So what with the four cap distance? What they want like 600 thousandths, almost like an inch. Does that make sense? Ah, that groove right there. Is that what that groove's for? What's that groove do? Hmm. Wonder if this one is measured. Maybe I didn't read the service manual correctly on that right there. But yeah, because 400 thousandths is actually like right below this ring groove right here. So I wonder if it is incorporating the cap. Because if I use the cap, it's about 125 thousandths. So that'd be like 525 thousandths. You want the top of the triple tree bridge right there. I mean, I don't know. Let's see what it looks like. Maybe I'll have to go read the service manual again to get a little bit more clarification before I finalize it. But it's really not a big deal to, set it up uh, as it is right now. And I can easily come back to that and make a quick adjustment. So I got to figure out, got a little hold up right here with our custom headlight. So take this off now. So we got, make sure we have no inconsistent binding. Too tight there. What's going on? Am I hitting anything? Oh, that's loose. Oh, I am. I'm hitting that. So is it supposed to go below that? Oh yeah, there it goes. Okay. Okay. So I wonder if that line right there is what that looks like. Camera angle there. I have to almost get on my tippy toes. It's kind of hard to see. Kind of eyeball it a little bit. I wonder if there's a circlip that's supposed to go right there. Sometimes they do that. I have to look at the parts diagram again. All right, so we're just going to temporarily kind of tighten up the lower forks or lower triple tree, lower bridge. Okay. I'm gonna loosen up these handlebars again so I can. Oh, actually, so I did leave them loose. I put a punch mark. Oh, you know what? That's why. I was saving the punch mark till the end. That's what I was doing. All right. Just that's the thing when you're working on the project bike. It's not like, especially when you run into a problem and now we have to order parts or maybe tools or something to fix it. And so you left off on it. Here you are, come back to it a week or so later. just trying to remember little things that you did. But like on this bike right here, they have the correct these bolts right here. I'm kind of surprised. These ones are okay, but the bolts that were originally in here weren't the correct type. Pretty dangerous. And we don't even really have the original handlebars. These are like handlebars off of something else, and they're upside down and backwards. But I guess it works in a way. And we didn't originally, if you I think it was in part 6, maybe the handlebars were kind of going over that. These switches didn't have locating holes, so I was able to drill some holes, kind of make them look nice and pretty. And now they're mounted here to where they, you know, the switch, the start button, the on-off button, the throttle position. Put new grips on. Got some P grips. It's nice Italian grips on it. Um, and yeah, so let's see if I can kind of these handlebars up just a little bit, as much as I can go. See if that holds it. All right. Let's see if I can get my box end. Oh, that was the issue. So I'm not going to get my box end. Okay. So technically the torque, we had the clip-ons. I think this bike, I'm not sure what kind of handlebars they had on it. I have to look at the picture, but pretty sure they didn't look like this. Probably something a little bit more upright, like an actual upright handlebar, maybe with some curvature, but probably would have had access to the top of the fork cap here. And you could also, I could probably take these off, but is I'd have to kind of lock the handlebars. The other thing too is kind of just the way that this bike is with the cable routing. Turning the handlebar to the right is fine for because of the way that the wiring and the cables go through here. This is nice and tight. I checked that, but with all this, basically with removing the fairing, having all this wiring here, kind of maybe we'll see if we can zip tie it out of the way for the customer here, but a little bit more of a chance of those wires getting stuck in the lock. But kind of one of those things that comes with a custom modified bike. And what's going on, guys? Just looking at the chat here. We got David DCG. What's going on, brother? Welcome to the chat. We got DF. What joke is this? What bike is this? This is a 2009 Kawasaki Ninja 650R. We got Samaka Honda Hornet. Good one. I could see where you're going with the Hornet because it's kind of a naked bike, but no, this is actually a Kawasaki. This is a Kawasaki Ninja. But yeah, so once again, let's see, what was it? The fork cap was 25 newton meters, so I'll take off my handlebars here. I'm just gonna go ahead and it feels like 25 newton meters. And you can even use like locking it up against the frame. That's what I was kind of referring to. That way you can kind of use that to get a better grip and a better torque. But don't really need too much, just enough. Just okay, perfect. Because the other thing is too is once you tighten this top triple tree here, it's actually going to apply force to those threads, and it's going to apply like an extra clamping force. So you don't really need to over tighten this. It's not going to come out under normal conditions. Let's see if I can get son of a bitch. Maybe like that. Okay. Good enough for me. It's about 25 newton meters. Ain't going nowhere. So I'm going to say as far as the fork height and the bridge, The spec is 400,000. So let's see where I'm at right here. So I'm about 300. So I think I could go just a little higher, and that makes me wonder if there's actually a circlip that's supposed to go in that groove there. So let's see, we're gonna try to go up just a little bit more. It's all good, Smaka. I wouldn't be able to tell what this thing is once. I mean, unless the only thing that kind of stands out to me is this shock location here is pretty particular. Um, kind of can't tell. There's no, obviously, no numbers or logos or any type of identification other than a flat black tank. So for all we know, this could be a Yamaha. Probably not a Ducati. Ducati doesn't make bikes like this, but definitely looks like some type of Japanese bike. All right, let's see where we're at. So 350. I don't know. Kind of want to go look. I mean, the other thing is too is I'm pretty sure they're all the same, but I think the service manual was like for the 0607. This is obviously an '09, but usually the characteristics, I don't think they made major changes until like the 10, 11, or 12 model. So this is kind of like the older one, like the 0607. And I think another way you can tell is by the exhaust. This is the exhaust system we put on. It's basically the original exhaust. So now we have the original header with the original exhaust, good air filter. I would expect the bike to actually run a lot better now. Probably sound a lot better. It's not going to probably cut out. It's not going to burn up the valves. Another thing, we gotta get a bolt in there. Found when we were going over the frame, we noticed the foot peg bracket is missing a bolt. So we're going to see if we can get something in there that might fit. I'm not sure if that's stripped out or just damaged from crashing, but that's usually what happens when you crash a bike and things kind of get bent, messed up. Man, yeah, a lot to go through on this bike here. This was definitely an interesting, fun project. I've only done a handful of 650Rs, and typically they're a little bit harder. There's just not as many parts available for them in a way, and I don't know, they're okay to work on, I guess. Not as fun as like a Gixxer or like a 636 or a CBR. It's more of a sport touring kind of bike. Hmm. And sometimes what I like to go off of also is like pre-existing clamping marks. Like sometimes you can see in like the triple trees, like how it was clamped in there originally. I'm not sure. I might have to go look on my laptop really quick. Uh, might be a quick delay game. How many minutes? We're about 45 minutes into this. Let's see here. I mean, realistically, all we need to do is set the fork height, and then we're going to go ahead and fork these lower triple trees, the upper triple tree. Go ahead and put in our new tire. Let's see what we got here. We got Continentals. Good sport tire. These are pretty decent, nice sticky rubber. Good economy tire. And let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much it. What else here? We got some brake caliper bolts. Let's make sure we got that pinch bolt for the right fork tube here. And actually, maybe what we'll do is we'll put just a little bit of anti-seize on the tip. And this bike didn't have a front fender. Let's see, brake line bolts in right here. And before we put on our calipers, we're going to leave them in that zip tie position until we go ahead and set the fork height. So let's see here. Our grips. Very nice. Which fits really well. It's a little stretched out from being clamped on incorrectly, and the locating pin's a little bit more worn out. It's not as like protruding as the throttle side, but either way, set into a nice position here with the grip, and everything feels nice and tight. It's a lot better than it was before. Shouldn't move, not unless like a large force is exerted on it, but should be fine. I kind of almost want to start it up. This, got this here, so I don't want to melt anything. And we still got to do an oil change. So after we get the front end on, I think I'm going to go ahead and take a quick break. It's almost soda time right now. What? It's about 3:30 Southern California time. Finally got the forks back on. That looks kind of cool. I need to hurry up and get this thing dialed in, actually. And you know what? Let's see. We got about 24% iPhone battery life. So maybe I'm going to go check the laptop, let the iPhone charge, come back. We'll set the level, get the front wheel on, change the oil really quick. And I want to say that was the last thing I needed to do. Just need to maybe check a couple more engine bolts. I need to check the engine mounts, make sure the engine mounts are good. Um, yeah, this has kind of like a somewhat, different engine mounting system compared to like most sport bikes here, but we'll go ahead and check the brackets and the main engine mounts, make sure everything feels nice and tight. Got one right here, swing arm pivot point, and doesn't appear as if that one doubles as an engine mounting point. Looks like we have a bracket hanger here for the upper and one on the lower. And yeah, that's gonna be a swing arm. And we already went ahead and did the chain and sprockets. That was on another video. Went ahead and torqued, put a new nice DID chain here. We put the VX3. It's really nice O-ring chain. Plenty of handled power for this 650cc sport touring bike. Let's see. Got those chain adjusters dialed in. What the spec was. Most of that information can be found right here. It's about 25 to 35 millimeters, about 1.0 to 1.4 inches of slack, measured about halfway. And you can kind of almost use like the side of the muffler here to kind of like, in a way, gauge like what 1 inch is. If you like push down and then, or like push up from here, push down. See, that's about 1 inch. And obviously, after about 300 to 600 miles, depending on how the bike's ridden, the chain's going to stretch a little bit, and then it's going to going to need to be lubed and adjusted again. Place the cotter pin, loosen up the axle, move these textures back. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's see. Got the gas tank back on. Got to scribe the battery. Put a date into service. Should be a decent battery. I think I've used a handful of these. I can't pull it out, but I think it's like a Caltric AGM. It's pretty affordable. Kind of keep the price. Uh, trying to keep things cost effective for the customer. And let's see, vacuum system good. Did notice this vacuum line here, a little bit cracked. That's for like a map sensor right here. So, I mean, not a big deal. It's not necessarily going to throw an engine code. What it's probably going to do, if it has a minor air leak, what it's going to end up doing is causing the engine to run rich, which isn't necessarily a bad thing during summer conditions or if you're riding the bike kind of hard.